Have you ever noticed how people look at you differently when you say you'd rather stay home alone on the weekend? That look of pity mixed with judgment, as if you'd just confessed to some serious personal failure. Many social dynamics have built a powerful narrative around loneliness, turning something natural into a symptom of inadequacy. But what if I told you that this whole fear of being alone was learned from an early age, and that there's a huge difference between being alone by choice and being isolated by circumstance? What if staying home, away from the constant noise, was exactly what you need to finally reconnect with yourself? Thoreau understood this over 170 years ago. He wasn't a bitter hermit who hated people. He was a guy who looked at the life that certain social standards offered, with all their conventions and expectations, and asked, "Is this really worth it?" His answer was to build a simple cabin near Walden Pond and spend 2 years living deliberately, as he himself put it. 2 years to discover what really mattered when you strip everything else away. And you know what he found out? That most of the things we think are essential are completely dispensable. That silence teaches more than 1,000 empty conversations. That being alone isn't punishment, it's privilege. The first thing that happens when you're truly alone is scary. You finally hear your own thoughts. Sounds obvious, but think about it. When was the last time you spent hours without any external stimulation? No music, no podcast, no endless scrolling, no having to answer messages, no automatic small talk about the weather or traffic. A lot of people live in constant noise that completely silences their inner voice. You wake up and immediately grab your phone. At breakfast, there's news playing. On the way to work, there's a playlist or podcast. At lunch, there are coworkers talking. At night, there are shows, social media, WhatsApp groups blowing up. When is there time left for you to hear what you actually think about your own life? I completely understand when you feel that initial anxiety of being alone, that emptiness that seems to scream. But you know what's happening there? You're finally making contact with thoughts and feelings that have been swept under the rug for weeks, months, maybe years. That dissatisfaction with work that you drown out by going drinking every Friday. That relationship that doesn't make sense anymore, but you keep because having someone seems better than having no one. That old dream you abandoned because the people around you thought it was impractical. All of this comes to the surface when you stop distracting yourself. And yes, it's uncomfortable. But it's necessary. This can be uncomfortable at first, and that's completely normal. Thoreau called this living deliberately. Not on autopilot, not doing what common expectations dictate, but consciously choosing each step. He woke with the sun not because he had an appointment, but because it made sense for his body. He spent the morning working in the garden, not because he needed to impress anyone, but because it fed him both literally and symbolically. In the afternoon, he walked through the forest, observing details that many people don't notice in a lifetime. And you know what he didn't do? He didn't check what the neighbors were doing. He didn't compare his life to anyone else's. He didn't perform for any audience. Because that's another thing solitude gives you. Total freedom over your time and energy. When you're home alone, you don't have to negotiate anything with anyone. Want to eat at 3 in the afternoon? Eat. Want to watch that documentary your friends consider boring? Watch it. Want to spend the whole day reading without exchanging a word with anyone? Perfectly valid. The amount of energy we spend negotiating preferences, schedules, and desires with other people is absurd. And look, I'm not saying relationships are bad. I'm saying you need moments where the only person you need to consider is yourself. Certain cultural standards will tell you that's selfishness. They'll make you feel guilty for choosing to stay home when you could be enjoying life out there. But think about it. Who decided that enjoying life necessarily involves being surrounded by people all the time? Who said that a Saturday night alone reading a book is worth less than a Saturday night at a noisy bar having conversations you'll forget the next day? Thoreau lived on less than $30 a year back then. People thought he was wasting his life. Today, 170 years later, millions of people read the reflections he wrote during that wasted period. Meanwhile, few remember the names of the guys who were busy being productive and socially accepted. You know what's one of the biggest reliefs of being alone? You finally stop performing. A lot of people live in constant social performance and don't even notice it anymore. At work, you perform professionalism. With family, you perform the role you've taken on in that dynamic. With friends, you perform the version of you they know and expect. On social media, you perform an edited and filtered life. It's exhausting. You don't really rest because there's always someone watching, judging, expecting something from you. Even when you're with people you love, there's still a layer of performance, however small it may be. Alone at home, that mask falls off. You can be completely ridiculous, weird, imperfect, vulnerable. You can cry without having to explain. You can laugh alone at something stupid. You can stay in pajamas all day without anyone judging you as unproductive. You can eat straight from the pot, sing off key, dance badly, talk to yourself. Thoreau said that many people live in deep, silent dissatisfaction, trying to meet expectations that never stop growing. Solitude is where you finally take that weight off your back and exist without having to justify your existence to anyone. And it's in this space that interesting things start to happen. You rediscover genuine hobbies and interests you'd abandoned because they weren't cool enough. That musical instrument sitting in the corner of your room. That drawing notebook you stopped using because someone said you had no talent. That desire to learn about astronomy, philosophy, history, anything that sparks real curiosity but doesn't serve to impress anyone. When you're alone, you don't need to choose activities based on their social value. You choose based on what genuinely interests you, what makes your brain light up. Thoreau spent hours watching ants fighting on the ground. He described their behavior in absurd detail, as if it were the Trojan War happening in miniature. For many people, that would be wasted time. For him, it was fascinating. He wasn't trying to be productive or relevant. He was simply following his natural curiosity. And you know what came out of those wasted hours looking at nature? Some of the deepest reflections ever written about simplicity, purpose, and what really matters in human life. Because creativity needs empty space to flourish. When your brain is constantly bombarded with external stimuli, it hardly enters the mode that neuroscientists call the default network, that kind of dreamy state where the best ideas appear. You know when you're in the shower and suddenly have an insight about something that was bothering you? It's because there, for a few minutes, your brain finally gets to process information without interruption. Solitude extends that shower to hours, days. That's when you connect dots you couldn't connect before. That's when solutions to old problems appear out of nowhere. That's when you finally understand patterns in your own life that were invisible in the chaos. Many of the great artists, writers, scientists, thinkers you admire had significant periods of solitude. Not because they were antisocial, but because creation requires silence. It requires you to dive deep into yourself and fish out things that live down there, far from the superficial noise. You can't write that book that's been in your head for years while responding to notifications every 5 minutes. You can't paint that canvas, compose that song, develop that idea. Solitude isn't where creativity runs dry. It's where it finally gets space to breathe and grow. Another thing that happens when you spend time alone, you stop living on autopilot. Think about your normal routine. You wake up, do the same things, go to the same places, have the same conversations, eat the same foods, watch the same types of content. Everything becomes automatic. You're not really living, you're repeating. It's like hitting play on a recording of your life and letting it roll. Thoreau called this living asleep. Many people are born, grow up, age without really waking up to their own existence. When you're alone, that pattern breaks. Suddenly you have to consciously decide what to do with each hour of the day. You don't have your girlfriend suggesting the usual restaurant. You don't have the friend group dragging you to the same bar every Saturday. You don't have the work routine structuring your day. You look at those empty hours and have to choose. At first, this can seem paralyzing, but that's exactly where freedom lives. You're finally living intentionally, not just reacting to what others expect or what routine dictates. And the more comfortable you get with that intentionality, the more you realize how little you need. Many cultural dynamics convince you that you need 1,000 things to be happy. You need the new car, the bigger apartment, the trendy clothes, the expensive restaurants, the trips to Instagram-worthy destinations, the wide social circle, the packed schedule. Thoreau went to Walden with practically nothing. He built a simple cabin. He grew his own food. His belongings fit on a short list, and he described that period as the richest of his life, not because he sought to suffer with less, but because when you remove all the excess, you finally see what's essential. You discover that a simple meal you prepared yourself satisfies more than any expensive restaurant you went to for a photo. That a book that really interests you is worth more than 10 shows you watch just because a lot of people are talking about them. That an entire afternoon doing absolutely nothing productive can be more restorative than any busy weekend full of commitments. Solitude teaches you minimalism organically. You stop accumulating things, experiences, and even relationships that don't add anything real. I know it's hard to hear this, but a lot of people maintain problematic relationships simply because they're afraid of being alone. That relationship that hasn't made sense for months, but breaking up means facing empty nights. That friendship that drains your energy, but at least it's someone to go out with on the weekend. That superficial social circle where you don't feel really seen, but it seems better than having no one. The fear of loneliness turns us into hostages of connections that do more harm than good. When you learn to be okay alone, that fear disappears. You don't need anyone anymore in the urgent sense of the word. And paradoxically, that's when you become capable of having truly healthy relationships. Because now you choose people out of genuine desire for connection, not out of desperate emotional need. You no longer accept crumbs of affection. You no longer tolerate disrespect just to avoid being alone. Thoreau said it's better to be alone than in bad company. And he was absolutely right. Conscious solitude frees you from harmful dynamics because you finally have a standard of comparison, the peace of being okay with yourself. Being alone also develops self-discipline in a way that few other things can. When you live with other people or are frequently surrounded, there's an external structure that pushes you. Other people's schedules, expectations, the shame of being seen procrastinating. Alone, none of that exists. No one's going to hold you accountable if you spend the whole day lying down doing nothing. No one's going to praise you if you wake up early and are productive. You need to create your own structure and completely internal motivation. At first, a lot of people fall apart. Without external pressure, it becomes total chaos. But if you persist, something interesting happens. You develop real responsibility to yourself, not performative. You wake up early not because someone's watching, but because you decided you want to make the most of the day. You keep your space organized not to impress visitors, but because you deserve to live in an environment that makes you feel good. You take care of your health, your projects, your goals, not for external validation, but out of genuine self-respect. Thoreau had a strict routine at Walden, but it was a routine he created himself based on what made sense for him, not what social expectations dictated. And you know what else changes when you're comfortable alone? You become extremely selective with your time and energy. Before, any invitation was accepted because staying home alone seemed sad. Now, leaving the house needs to really be worth it. That social event full of people you barely know and superficial conversations about nothing? No thanks. I'd rather stay home reading. That outing that's going to consume your energy all week just so you can post that you were there? Also, no. Solitude teaches you that your time is the most valuable resource you have, and you stop wasting it on things that don't add anything real. Thoreau had few visitors at Walden, but when he did, they were deep, meaningful conversations that lasted hours and really mattered. He wasn't interested in small talk or keeping up social appearances. He was interested in genuine exchange of ideas. And that's what happens when you develop a rich inner life through solitude. You automatically filter out superficiality. You prefer quality over quantity in absolutely everything, especially in human connections. Solitude also gives you something that a lot of people intensely avoid: space to process difficult emotions. Many cultural dynamics treat sadness, anger, anxiety as problems to be solved immediately. Feeling something bad? Call your friends to distract yourself. Go out drinking. Watch something. Buy something. Anything but sit with that emotion and actually feel it. The problem is that unprocessed emotions don't disappear. They stay there, accumulating, creating internal knots that eventually manifest in more intense ways. When you're alone, there's nowhere to run. That sadness you've been putting off for months finally catches up with you. And yes, it can be very uncomfortable at first. But you know what happens when you stop running and simply allow yourself to feel? The emotion passes. It doesn't stay forever with the same intensity. You cry, process, understand where it's coming from, and eventually the intensity decreases. Thoreau wrote about melancholy with the same naturalness he wrote about joy. He understood that both are necessary parts of the human experience, not something to be avoided. Solitude is therapeutic precisely because it encourages you to face what's happening inside you. There's not enough distraction in the world to make your internal problems disappear. You can avoid them for a long time through constant socialization, but they'll be there, waiting. Either you can use solitude to finally face them head-on, process, really work through them. Is it uncomfortable? Very. Is it necessary? Absolutely. Each person lives this process at different rhythms, and that's completely valid. There's also a practical side that few people mention. Staying home alone saves a lot of money. Think about how much you spend every month on socializing. Bars, restaurants, cafes, events, trips, gifts, new clothes, because you can't show up repeatedly in the same thing. Uber to go and come back from all this. Add it all up. Now imagine if half of those expenses were simply eliminated because you're comfortable staying home. Thoreau lived an entire year on the equivalent of a few dollars. He proved you need far less than many cultural dynamics make you believe. I'm not saying to stop going out or spending money on anything. I'm saying that when you stop doing things because of social pressure and start doing only what genuinely adds value, your money stretches absurdly further. You spend on what really matters to you, not on what others expect you to do. And suddenly that constant financial pressure decreases, because you're no longer trying to finance a lifestyle that isn't even really yours. The ability to be okay alone also prepares you for life's inevitable challenges. Because there are times when you're going to be alone, whether you want to or not. End of a relationship, loss of someone close, moving to a new city, job loss, any major crisis tends to involve some level of circumstantial loneliness. If you're terrified of being alone, these situations can shake you deeply. But if you've already developed this ability to be okay with yourself, you navigate these crises with much more emotional structure. Thoreau said we need to confront only the essential facts of life. Stop living in the superficial and face the hard truths. Losses happen. Relationships end. People disappoint you. You're going to fail at important things. All of this is part of the human experience. Solitude gives you the internal strength to look at these truths without needing constant external support. You learn that you can sustain yourself emotionally alone when necessary, and that's a skill that will serve you for life. Here's the most beautiful paradox of all. When you're truly okay alone, you become better company for others, because you're no longer desperately seeking attention, validation, or filling a void. You're not draining energy from people around you trying to compensate for your own internal lack. You arrive at social gatherings whole, present, with something real to offer. Conversations become richer because you've had time to think, process, develop your own ideas. You're not just repeating opinions you saw on the internet, or echoing what a lot of people say. Thoreau would return from the forest to Concord occasionally, and have conversations that people remembered years later. Not because he was socially skilled in the traditional sense, but because he had a deep inner life that overflowed when he interacted with others. He wasn't trying to impress or please. He was simply sharing what he discovered in solitude. And that was infinitely more interesting than any social performance. Solitude improves the quality of all your interactions because you stop seeing people as tools to fill your void and start seeing them as complex human beings you choose to connect with when it makes sense. Your relationships become more honest, deeper, more meaningful. You stop having 100 superficial friends and start having half a dozen real connections. And that's infinitely more valuable. Now look at the world in 2025. We live in the most connected era in human history. You can talk to anyone anywhere on the planet in seconds. You can consume infinite content, participate in virtual communities, be constantly available, accessible, plugged in. Technology promised this would make us happier, more fulfilled. And what happened? Levels of anxiety, emotional distress, paradoxical loneliness are higher than in other recent times. Because being connected all the time isn't the same as being really connected. In this context, choosing to be alone is revolutionary. It's saying no to the algorithms that want your attention 24 hours a day. It's refusing to be a product, refusing to be a perpetual consumer, refusing to perform for engagement metrics. It's saying no to FOMO culture that makes you feel like if you're not doing something Instagram-worthy every weekend, you're wasting your life. It's rejecting excessive productivity that turns even your free time into something that needs to be optimized and monetized. Thoreau was radical in 1845 when he chose deliberate solitude. Many around him thought he was crazy, throwing his life away, being irresponsible. Today, we recognize him as one of the most important thinkers in American history. And you can be radical now by making the same choice in your context. You don't need to build a cabin in the forest, but you can choose to spend Saturday alone at home even when your friends invite you out. You can turn off your phone for a whole day and see what happens. You can say no to social commitments that don't make sense just to please others. Every time you consciously choose solitude, you're resisting. You're saying that your life doesn't need to look like other people's. That you don't need to be busy all the time, social all the time, productive all the time, available all the time. That there's deep value in simply being, without doing anything that serves to impress or please anyone. This bothers a lot of people because it challenges the foundation of how certain social dynamics work. But that's exactly why it's so necessary. Staying home alone isn't failure. It's not a sign that you're antisocial, weird, or that something's wrong with you. It's choosing to live on your own terms, reclaiming your attention, your energy, your time, your authenticity. It's choosing to know who you really are when you're not performing for anyone. It's choosing to hear your own voice instead of the constant noise telling you who you should be. Thoreau finished his 2 years at Walden and returned to community life. But he came back different. He came back knowing exactly what mattered to him, what was essential, what was dispensable. He came back with clarity that many people don't have. And he spent the rest of his life advocating that we should all have our own Walden, whatever form that takes. A place where we can reconnect with the essential, away from the noise, the expectations, the performances. You don't need 2 years. You can start with a weekend, with an afternoon, with a few hours. Turn everything off. Don't respond to anything. Don't consume anything. Just be there, alone with your thoughts, and see what happens. It'll be strange at first. It might even be distressing. But if you persist, you'll discover something precious. You are enough company for yourself. And when you know that for real, deep down, everything changes. Solitude isn't emptiness. It's space. Space to grow, to think, to feel, to create, to process, to simply be. In a world that tries to fill you with constant noise, choosing silence is one of the most courageous acts you can do. So next time someone asks you why you're home alone again, you don't need to justify yourself. You can simply smile and know that you're doing something a lot of people are afraid to try, living deliberately.